Got it. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our October. We are in October. The season went by so fast, but we are now in October. And this is our Engaging with Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion um, series with Danielle Johnson. Before we get started, I want to do some housekeeping things. First, please sign in. My coworker Stephanie put in the chat box a sign-in link. Would you please sign in using that link? And at the bottom of the globe, at the bottom of your screen, you should see a globe where you can choose your language. At that time, you can do that if you need to. The interpreters have been provided for you. This is a QR code. You can scan the QR code and sign in as well. This morning, I'm going to turn this over to Danielle. We will be discussing emotional intelligence. So Danielle, I'm going to turn this over. I'm going to stop sharing and turn this over to you at this moment.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Can everybody hear me clearly?
Yes.
Great. And as always, if something comes up in sound or if you can't see something, please let me know. Don't let me just talk on and on and on and you all don't know or see what I'm talking about. That has happened to me a couple of times. So good morning for me. Well, actually, it's good afternoon for me, morning for you all. Hailing from Wichita, Kansas this morning. I want to thank you for joining me, and I see some familiar faces, so thank you all for coming back and following along in the series. I'm your conversation catalyst today, and our topic is emotional intelligence, which goes really hand in hand when we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion work. The outcomes for today, or at least what we're really shooting for, is that you all will have an understanding of personal emotional intelligence, or how it's showing up for you, a 101 understanding of psychological safety, and then understanding the connection between emotional intelligence and diversity, equity, and inclusion. So that's what we are shooting for today. Please make sure that you are taking care of yourself in this time frame and getting what you need from this series as well. Our conversational expectations are as follows, and please feel free to utilize these expectations in the discussions you're continuing to have. What I love to say is when you go to conferences or trainings or workshops, while these are great spaces to connect and network, and these are great spaces to attain the information, it's what you actually put into practice when you leave the space. When you log off today, what will you be doing differently with the information that you are coming in connection with? So as a facilitator, I do reserve the right to halt the discussion and maintain order. I've not had to do a whole lot of order maintaining. The only thing that kind of keeps us barred a little bit is we have a limited time together and folks want to be able to just share and share and share. And we love to be able to story share, but just a limited amount of time. So I'm sorry that you don't get as much time in your breakout spaces as maybe you would like. Be present and respectful in the space. This is the time that you've signed up. I'm not quite sure if there's any folks on here because it's mandated, but if not, right, you've signed up to be in this space. So I would ask that you just be prepared to engage. If you can, and if you are in a place, join us on the screen. That would be great, giving us your full attention. When you do go into your breakout groups, being prepared to have some conversation in that space and ensuring that you're as present as you possibly can in the Zoom world that we're in. Lean in, I like to say lean into discomfort, because in the space of discomfort is opportunity for growth. It is easy for us to be able to be in our echo chambers, if you will, particularly in social media. You can hit block and unfriend in any moment, right? In general, in life, when you're engaging with a coworker, a family member, sometimes it's hard to disengage those folks when you have to be in their spaces. So how much time do we take in learning someone's cultures, values, differences, so leaning into those spaces? Wait, why am I talking? Why am I not talking? For some folks, they need a little bit more time to process. Maybe they're not I want to share my thoughts in the front of the room type person. If you're that person, I ask that you kind of get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Feel free to share as much as you like, engage as much as you like in this space. But also being mindful for those of us that are a little bit more talkative. Sometimes we are taking up all the space in the conversation. Well, I ask that you just wait. But I feel like we're an intimate enough group to be able to really engage with one another today. One mic, one person speak at a time. Land the plane or park the car. Ask your question, say your statement, right? We want to treat this space as an educational space. So I want to just be mindful that we want everyone to get what they need. So please ask your question, say your statement. In doing so, we want to assume good intent because sometimes we do put our foot in our mouth or we might say something offensive, and that's okay. Understanding that freedom of speech is not freedom from consequence. There's sometimes consequences when you misstep, but changing a behavior goes a long way, right? There's step one, you can apologize. Step two is I've been educated, I know better, I'm not going to keep making that same mistake, right? So that's how we want to show up in these spaces. Stories stay and lessons leave. We may share a little bit more about who we are, maybe get a little vulnerable in the space. We don't want to share each other's stories out of this space as gossip. However, we can share the principles that we learn from one another, right? Our stories are our own, and we're not giving license for folks to tell our stories outside of this space. And then prepare for intentional engagement, both in this space and outside of the space. Whatever you've gained in this space, when you go out, please feel free to share. And I encourage folks to share, hey, I was sitting in this training earlier today and I heard this concept. What are your thoughts about it, right? And sharing it with the unusual suspects. 9 times out of 10, when you're in a DEI conference space, folks are in that space unless they have been made to be there. They're choosing to be in this conversation. So they're probably already doing the work or they're comfortable in this discussion. It's the folks that don't usually come that you want to share this information with, or the people in your circles that are just anti DEI. How can you use your relationship to build their knowledge and equity around this particular topic? So please feel free to utilize what you see. We're going to keep this conversation rolling. There may be a few of you that engage in mindfulness. What we know is that mindfulness is not a new concept. It's something that some of our earliest ancestors, folks in our own lineage perhaps, were doing mindfulness so that they could be as engaged as they possibly can. So I would ask that in this space, as we are leaning into emotional intelligence, you maybe center yourself on the quote. It is very important to understand that emotional intelligence is not the opposite of intelligence. It's not the triumph of heart over the head. It is the unique intersection of both. So just kind of thinking about what that means for us. Emotional intelligence is not a new concept. It's been around for quite some time, but sometimes I think these things kind of become buzzwordy. And so we're kind of throwing it around, but how are we actually engaging in emotional intelligence? So we're going to gear up for our first breakout session. Want to get you all warmed up with one another. Some questions for you all to consider as you spend about 8 minutes in your groups together. And I do have these questions in the chat. We I would like to know what you all already know about emotional intelligence. And if nothing, you can say, you know, I really don't know. It's the first time I'm coming up with this concept, or share the knowledge that you already have. And what that looks like in the rest of the questions is how well do you understand the connection between emotional intelligence and the role that you play in your job or organizations or spaces, how it shows up for your team, and then the overall work environment. So how are you engaging emotional intelligence? And some of you may already have workshops in place, or that's a part of your vision and values. Some might not be doing any of these things. What's challenging about emotional intelligence in the workplace? So think about the culture that you work in. All of our workspaces and organizations have a culture. What is that culture? Some cultures may say, don't even say EI in my space. You're not allowed to say DEI because that's not a part of our culture. We don't want it. We don't like it. We're banning books, right? Or you might have folks that say, we love emotional intelligence. We have all these things in place. So thinking from that lens, are there challenges to this work, be it by design or just people that don't like it? And then if you can just identify one person that might be able to share out, because I would like to hear from some of the groups on what they talked about in the space. So you'll have about 8 minutes. And we'll go ahead and get you in your breakout rooms.
Whenever we're ready, just give me the thumbs up.
We're ready.
Oh, yeah.
Welcome back. As you could tell, we were talking about food and the holidays. So we did not get a chance to enjoy breakfast this morning. That being said, I hope you all had an opportunity to engage with one another. If I could just hear from a couple of folks on how emotional intelligence is showing up in your role, your team, your organization overall. Has the culture already started embracing it, or is this a concept that's not really being talked about? So don't be shy, folks. If I can hear from 1 or 2 people, that would be great.
I can share.
Thank you.
In our team, in our breakout group, we discussed how, for example, at TCRC, we're very open with the DEI group, and that's it's great that we can discuss topics like that. We also have some agencies that are very much aware about like mental health awareness,
Mhm.
and kind of incorporate that in their current roles and with staff, not just keeping in mind the mental health and the emotional intelligence within the agency and staff, but also the community that we're serving.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that. So we got some organizations that are plugged in and doing the work. If I can hear from someone else, another person, is there something different happening? One other person. There's something that you all talked about that you think should be shared in the
I
larger
can
space.
go.
Go ahead.
We just talked about the challenges and how some people aren't accepting to emotional intelligence, or just like that we could bump into clients who aren't self-aware of their emotions, and that's where we kind of come in as case managers to kind of help them and educate them a little bit that it's okay to feel this way and how the next steps are to react to this way so it doesn't kind of blow up.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mm.
For that. Yeah, right. Sometimes just engaging in emotions can be tough in a workspace or case manager space, a family member space, especially when folks are not self-aware, and they certainly don't. They're not necessarily connected to the language either. I've talked to some folks. We're talking about emotional intelligence, and like, stop using those higher level words. You think you're better than? No, that's not what I'm trying to do here, right? And then you got to back out and reframe and rephrase and meet people where they are so that you can bring them along in their own emotional journey, right? Thank you all for just engaging a little bit. So we got some folks on the spectrum where they are already doing the work, is showing up in the workspace or their organizations. While there may be some hesitancy in other spaces as we're kind of watching the pendulum swing back and forth around DEI efforts, particularly when we think about the affirmative action appeals and some of those things happening at the national federal level, how that affects how you get to show up in the DEI programs and things that you're doing in your organization. Some organizations are looking at renaming, changing some things. So, sometimes we have to be flexible and fluid to continue to do the work, but also get the funding to move our missions and visions forward. So just want to thank you all for those that might be experiencing that now to stay the course. What is emotional intelligence? And so while oftentimes we might have different words and verbiage, our own definitions, right? Oftentimes we find that language is regional, it's cultural, things mean different things to certain groups. I want to root us in the same kind of definition or working definition as we move forward today. Emotional intelligence in this space is recognizing, understanding, and managing our own emotions, recognizing and understanding and influencing the emotions of others. And then emotional intelligence is a set of abilities that can be measured, learned, practiced, and mastered. And I'll say EI interchangeably with emotional intelligence. EI allows us to choose how we want to respond and behave. Emotional intelligence also goes by emotional quotient. We don't say EQ as much, in which how we say more EI, but there are some organizations and spaces that use the term EQ instead of EI. Just kind of a brief history so that you all know, again, when sometimes I run into people and they're like, no, emotional intelligence is new. That's a new concept. It's shown up in really early history. So as early as 1909, at least, as far as being tracked in this sense, you're seeing the term social intelligence come up. The work of John Dewey, an educational philosopher, he defines social intelligence as the power of observing and comprehending social situations in moral principle and education. Then we see it again in 1920 and article Intelligence and Its Uses in a Harper's Monthly magazine, again as social intelligence. Then we see David Welshler recognize the effects of multiple factors on intelligence behavior and suggested models of intelligence would be incomplete until all of the factors were fully fathomed. So he defined intelligence as the aggregate or global capacity of the individual to act purposefully, to think rationally, and to deal effectively with his environment. So very academic in nature when we first see the introduction of social intelligence and emotional intelligence, if you will. Then as you move forward again, some white papers in clinical psychology and psychiatry, you see the words coming up out of Cornell University in 1964, sensitivity to expression of emotional meaning in 3 modes of communication. We see some of the language pop up again in 1966, again, still very much used in an academic sense. You're starting to see emotional intelligence and emancipation published in a psychotherapeutic journal, Practice of Child Psychology and Child Psychiatry. 1985, emotional intelligence as is appears as that particular term in an unpublished doctoral dissertation of the American research of Wayne Payne. 1987, we see it coming up again as emotional quotient. So again, very much in the psychology, psychiatry realm that it's popping up. How we experience it more today when we think about the early 90s and 1990, Daniel Goleman, a number of books and some books for your consideration. There's also an updated version of these books on emotional intelligence. A lot of work done in that space. Psychologist and New York Times science writer Daniel Goleman, who knew of Mayer and Salvi's work, asked their permission to borrow their model and the use of the name emotional intelligence for a book Goleman had earlier written 2 books and has been writing a regular column for lay readers in psychology as the New York Times. So we see that crossover from more of the psychiatry space and the academic space into day-to-day life, right? They saw the importance of bringing emotional intelligence into the workspace. How are we engaging, ensuring that folks are able to understand that emotions show up in work too? It doesn't just stop, right? Something happens in the morning at home, your day is still affected by that thing, yet you still have to show up at work and do your thing, right? And those emotions can take you out of your day. It can affect how you engage with those around you. And so understanding like how do we move forward with psychological safety and emotional intelligence in the workspace? What are some benefits of emotional intelligence? So when you're thinking about, especially if you're in environments where folks feel like, well, this is just another DEI buzzword, or we don't need to be focusing on that. Things for consideration. Leaders are better equipped for conflict management, difficult feedback, direct communication, um, accountability, and empathy when there is emotional intelligence in the space. So just thinking about how a leader or how a person, right? I mean, if you don't consider yourself a leader, or if you're not formally a leader in title like manager, how you can practice it day to day amongst your teams, embraces adaptive leadership styles, and can articulate a vision that team members are likely to follow. Right, so that is a benefit. The American Psychological Association showcases several studies found strong associations between leaders with strong emotional intelligence, help driving change and having visionary leadership in the workspace. When leadership models emotional intelligence, it opens the door for team members to engage in a higher level of emotional intelligence. It's a predictor for multicultural competence, right? When you have a little bit more empathy, when you're more engaged with your emotional state, you're going to be a little bit more open to the experiences of those that are different than you on the job, the experiences of those that you're trying to connect and engage with. And in a work culture that embraces emotional intelligence, creates stronger relationships, trust building, which turns and helps employee retention. And we're all dealing with labor shortages, right? I can't think of a field that doesn't need thousands more people in it so that it can continue to thrive, be it nursing, nonprofit, construction. We all need people, but we also need caring people and people that are wanting to thrive alongside our organizations. But how do you build a space? I've shared this before. We believe that diversity is a fact. You're always going to have diversity. You may be lacking facets of diversity, but you have diversity nonetheless. You don't always have inclusive, welcoming, belonging spaces. You don't always work along people that are going to be emotionally intelligent and ask simple questions like, how was your weekend? How are things going? How is your mom? Hey, I read that such and such passed. I'm so sorry to hear that you're dealing with that loss, right? Humanizing the work relationship, because we don't just turn into robots when we get in on the job. And when we think about the changing demographics, and we think about the multi-generational nature of our workspace, there are generations that were taught no emotions, don't bring that into the work. I clock in, I clock out. You don't need to know me more than that. And we're having generations that are saying, I want friendships. I want to know that my job is socially conscious. I want to know that we stand for something. So those are the types of things that are showing up in the workspace. And if we are emotionally intelligent and we're creating opportunities with one another, we can grow a place and space where folks want to come to work at, right? and ensuring that we're providing those opportunities. So we're going to go into an activity. I'm going to explain the activity first. You should have received an email that has a worksheet. It is a fillable PDF style worksheet, just so you are able to kind of engage in it. But also the PowerPoint will be up as you all are working in these groups. So if you want to just use a scrap piece of paper, you can do that as well. But this activity is really going to kind of talk through our own personal emotional state and what we assign to emotions and how they read for us. So right here, you're going to see a person. So this is you as this person, and you're going to identify an emotion. And then you're going to, in that emotion, you're going to put down a couple sentences on what your beliefs are about that particular emotion. And once you are done with that, choosing the emotion and putting down the beliefs, you're going to write down, well, what are the consequences of the belief of that particular emotion? So just to give you an example, here are some emotions for your consideration. This is not a full comprehensive list, but pick whatever emotion makes most sense for you. Maybe it's anger, sadness, fear, joy, interest, shame, surprise, disgust. You'll pick that emotion, whatever one it is. And then here are some things to consider if you don't necessarily have your kind of own beliefs. But some examples might be, if I lose control of my emotions in front of others, they will think less of me. I should be able to control my emotions. Other people don't feel this way. There must be something wrong with me. Okay. So these are some examples of what that could look like, a belief that you're assigning to that emotion. And when it's all said and done, you're going to have something that looks like this. So I'm going to use anxiety as an example. Anxiety, that belief of anxiety for me might look like, if I let myself feel this emotion, I will become overwhelmed by it. If I tell others how I feel, they will use it against me. Other people don't feel this way. There must be something wrong with me, right? And the consequence for me of that is I withdraw and isolate myself so that others don't find out how I feel. Prevents me from receiving the emotional support I might need because I'm masking. I don't want you to know that I'm dealing with anxiety right now. And then I am harsh and self-critical towards myself. So just kind of a gist. You don't have to follow it exactly. You might have your own interpretation, but you're going to spend about 8 minutes in your group. So if you want to take some time, just kind of jot down some things. Again, you're going to identify an emotion, 2 or 3 beliefs about that emotion, and what are the consequences of that. And you all will work alongside each other in your small groups. So just kind of talk through what you identified, what your belief systems are about that, and then we'll bring you back into the larger room to have a larger discussion about those emotions. Questions about what I just said? No? Okay. We are going to break you out here again about 8 minutes, and then we'll bring you back in and just kind of conversate about how this activity worked out for you and your group. All right. Folks are filling the screen back up. Welcome back. Welcome back. If I can hear from just a couple of people and just kind of considering what you talked about, how was this exercise when you look at some of the consequences of things that you wrote down, any insights that you received from just listening to other people and how they interpret their emotions. So I can hear from maybe 1 or 2 people, please.
I'll go. We
Thank you.
had a really good one in our group, and it was the very last one. So, and it had to do with pride, someone being prideful, or being proud of their accomplishments and feeling happy and expressing that and wanting to strive for more and just different things with that. And then one of the consequences that we actually ended up with was, okay, those are good things and in our opinion to strive for, but others may look at that as arrogance.
Mm.
You're too prideful. And
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes that gets just the negative connotation about being proud and confident and striving for more can be looked at in that sense. I thought that was really good because we first started off with us being anxious. We had anxiety based, COVID kind of brought that up in a lot of people that never experienced it. I myself was one of those people. I never experienced having anxiety until I was here locked down and in your space, and you never know what could happen. And depression was another thing too. But ending up with that being prideful or having that proud or being proud was something interesting and to see how people the consequences of it could be happy for you as the individual because you're striving and doing what you want to do and it's making you happy, but others can look at that as arrogance.
Yeah, that's a good one. Thank you.
Mhm.
Right. I've heard folks, a similar thing came up with another group I did this with, and joy was one, right? Like, I want to be joyous. I'm happy. I come to work. And then the consequence of that is, oh, she's always happy. Why? There's nothing going on in her life. I'm tired of her positivity, right? And there is such a thing as toxic positivity, right? Not everything is great all the time, right? But we're mad that people are happy. That is a thing, especially when we might not be walking in our own purpose and passion. And so I always say, soul search. If you have an emotion about what someone else is sharing, and particularly on social media, right? For those of you that are in that space, we're only seeing a highlight reel of people's lives. I don't know a lot of folks that are posting the worst of the worst. Some folks will just overshare, and that's just who they are, and that's fine. But for the most part, you're seeing the happy married couple. You're seeing that this is my child doing this. You're not seeing my child got sent home. He's been suspended from the bus. We're fighting, right? Usually, that's not the thing that you're sharing in your emotional state. Thank you for that. Maybe one other person.
I can go.
Thank you.
Yes, my name is Marcia, everybody. I'm glad to be here. And I just have a suggestion for your list. It's wonderful, but I would like to, ask you a favor if you can add something like what happened with a person doesn't have any support system. Because I'm talking about this because I'm Hispanic and I'm coming from another country. And sometimes, people come to this country without anybody else, no family, no any relationship with nobody here. Everything is new. And that will be an issue, because maybe they have troubles and they don't know where to go or they don't have anybody else. So, and it doesn't having a support system, we need to, like, teach them, how to be aware of, even if they don't have a family member here, we have a community, and a community can be a support system for them. So I think that one happens a lot with people coming from another country to this beautiful country, of course, and they feel alone here, because they don't know where to go. That's why it's very important your role for everybody here. That if you are case manager or you work with families in the community, to let them know that they are not alone, and even if they don't have a family member here, we have a family in the community can be a great support for them. So that's the only thing that I want to suggest for the list. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that suggestion. Right. And that, again, emotional intelligence, being connected to folks to know and understand how someone maybe got here and they don't have anyone here. Right. We have a number of immigrant community members here in Wichita. We have an amazing organization of the IRC, International Rescue Commission. And so they do a good job of connecting and welcoming folks. But that's a lot of communities don't have that welcoming Calvary. They don't have ambassadors in the community connecting folks. And so anytime we can be in those spaces and create a warm, welcoming, belonging space and sharing those resources goes a long way. So thank you for that. So we're going to kind of continue on. Let's just being mindful of what were some of the things that were shared and understanding. And the consequences doesn't mean it has to be bad, right? There are consequences to everything. But what are some of those beliefs? Are we carrying our own healthy beliefs around certain emotions? Understanding how we were raised. If you were raised in a household with caregivers that says, "Stop all that crying," but we don't share our emotions here, or "Man up," whatever those little quips and those sayings are, they live in us. And so that affects how we show up emotionally in spaces too. Are we comfortable sharing? If we were raised to not believe in getting therapy, if we were raised to believe that only your religion is therapy, right? Those things shape how we show up in the workspace and place. And so it's really important for us to understand the culture and background that come with shared emotion and what it means to be able to freely share. It's a privilege to be able to freely share your emotion and seek the help that you need and to get the help that you need. Because oftentimes we're taught in a lot of our cultures, no, we don't do that, or you keep it to yourself, or nothing is that bad, right? We sometimes uplift resilience to a fault, that systems are creating adversity for folks and we have to rise up with resilience, when really, if we change the system, we wouldn't have to just create resilient people for resilience sake, but people that are happy and healthy and working within healthy systems and boundaries. So as we move forward, or drawing towards the end, how do we implement emotional intelligence? What can that look like within ourselves, within our workspaces, our organizations, our faith organizations, or what have you? Understanding management of self, management of relationships and teams, environments, right? How are you managing your own emotional state? How do you check in with yourself? Who is your circle, your accountability partners that you trust and want to hear from, that will tell you, ooh, you're not showing up as your best self today? And are you prepared to hear that feedback? Who is your kitchen cabinet? Who are the people that you put around you that can call you out and say, you led that meeting, but that argument that happened yesterday, it seeped in, or think you're treating this person a little differently than the rest of the team. Why is that? Are you still harboring some of that upsetness? Do you think that this person is coming for your job, right? Very candid conversations. Who are the folks that can help you candidly work through some things? How are you managing yourself? How are you managing team relationships? Is it your role to step in? Do you have a strong HR person? How does conflict resolution show up? Are you conflict averse? So just understanding who on your team can really step in and help manage some of the things. And what's the environment? Oftentimes folks are afraid to tell you the mistake that they made. And in some places it might be small. In other places, a plane could fall out of the sky because you didn't share that you messed up something, right? A surgery could go wrong. In high risk spaces, it's really important to have emotional intelligence, because if someone can't tell you that a machine broke and those pieces got stuck in the meat that went out in the world, and we have to recall thousands of pounds of hamburger meat, that's a big deal. And some of the things that are happening on the job, the mistakes that are costing our organizations thousands of dollars, lawsuits, and people, are because there's no emotional intelligence in the space. People are afraid to say I misstepped. People are afraid to ask for help because they feel like they're going to be talked down to, demeaned, or maybe lose their job. So what's the environment that we're creating for people to come forward when things are not right? Being mindful in a space, right? Be it meditation, taking a moment, taking those breaths, ensuring that people are taking their breaks on the job. If you're privileged to have a job that says take your lunch, take your 15-minute breaks, take the break, because being overworked helps you not be as engaged, emotionally intelligent, right? When you're tired, when you can't see straight, when you're just moving forward, oh, I don't need to eat the lunch, I don't need to take the quick walk. Those things affect how you show up. Your mental and physical health also matters in emotional intelligence. And then how are we mitigating biases and assumptions that pop up, right? This person is always late to work. We need to write them up. But we are not stopping to ask, I noticed that you're tardy. Work starts at 8 o'clock. You're coming in at 8:30 every day. What's going on? Oh, well, I got to catch the bus and there's 3 exchanges before I get to work. My apologies, right? We have to dig in before we write up, we got to coach folks. Hey, well, what do we need to do to help you there? Or, when we hired you, you had regular transportation. You're usually on time. These last 2 months, what's been popping up? Oh, well, I have my daughter now and I'm a caregiver and I have to take my daughter to work. But we don't always ask those additional questions when we notice that something has changed on the job. So that's the emotional intelligence to say something is different about this person. They're usually like this. Let me ask the appropriate questions or get an understanding. Danielle Goleman, again, emotional intelligence, why it can matter more than your actual IQ, has this kind of 4-way box that really kind of goes into understanding how emotional intelligence is kind of connected to one another. So like what we know, our own self-awareness, and how that feeds into social awareness, relationship management, self-management, with emotional intelligence at the center of this box, right? So what I know and what I do. what I know and what I say, right? How are we actively doing emotional intelligence in action, right? So self-management being you're able to control impulsive feelings and behaviors, managing your emotions in healthy ways, taking initiative, follow through on commitments, and adapting to changing circumstances. Many of us are working in changing circumstances, particularly after COVID or whatever we're saying, right? We're still in COVID, whatever level of COVIDness we are in. How are we interacting in and changing and being adaptive? Our self-awareness, right? You recognize your own emotions, how they affect your thoughts and behaviors, knowing your strengths and weaknesses, and having the self-confidence to know, you know what, I shouldn't be a part of this conversation. I'm too close to this, or I'm friends with this person. I don't need to be on the mitigation team for this particular scenario because I'm too close to this person, right? So knowing and being self-aware in that way. Social awareness. How do you empathize with the situation? You can understand the emotions, needs, and concerns of other people. You pick up on emotional cues. You feel comfortable socially and recognize power dynamics in a group or organization, right? Understanding how people are showing up. Sometimes folks are coming to you and they may be emotionally dumping. Are you prepared for that emotional dump? Some of us are just the people that everyone goes to just share. And where do we go to get our cup filled? You're overflowing with everybody else's things and you're giving all the advice, but you're not dumping somewhere else too. So what's your emotional backup? Because you might be giving bad advice because you're mad about a situation that's on your plate, but you're guiding from a place of an empty cup. And we oftentimes need to make sure that we're refilled. Relationship management, you know how to develop and maintain good relationships, communicate clearly. We like to say clear as kind. If you're a Brene Brown fan and you like her vulnerable work and some of those things, you might check out some of the work that she does. Inspiring others, influencing others, working well with teams, and manage conflict is a big thing. A lot of folks say, I don't want to manage conflict, but the little things turn into the big things. The big things cost your organization time, people, and talent. And if we don't mitigate the small things, we certainly cannot handle the large things that hit our organizations and can ultimately close our doors or create trust issues within the communities that we work alongside. And we don't want to add any more trust issues into the communities that we work with. So we're going to get into psychological safety, which kind of brings us, again, closer to the end of our time today, because emotional intelligence and psychological safety go hand in hand. Psychological safety really talks about the spaces that you're in. So in this space, again, common language, the shared belief that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. So just thinking about yourself, being reflective, how risky can you be in your organization? What does that look like? Members are comfortable admitting mistakes or bringing up difficult topics. The team learns from their errors together. It creates a safe environment where members openly share ideas with a sense of confidence that the team will not embarrass, reject, or punish someone for speaking up. Again, just thinking about the safety in our organizations and on our teams. What does that look like for you as you're just being reflective? Can you take those gambles? Can you take those chances? Are you able to share? Can folks take those chances and be open and honest with you? Or are you the supervisor, manager, friend that's ready to go off? Do you create fear in this space, right? Because we also have to hold ourselves accountable. I have a quick video from Simon Sinek, also some really great leadership work that he does as well. No shortage of books, TED Talks for you to consider. Please let me know if you can't hear or see something. 1 second. Oops. I wish this was set for me automatically. Okay.
I think some people turn off the humanity when they go to work. You know, they may be, you know, loving parents and loving friends and loving, you know, children to their own parents, and yet for some reason there's a switch that they think that that's irresponsible to do at work. Now, I'm not talking about necessarily wearing your heart on your sleeve every day. There is something called emotional professionalism. You know, if you're having a bad day, you can say, listen, I'm a little off my game today, but you can't sit in a meeting with your arms folded and be grumpy and give one-word answers. That's emotionally unprofessional. You know, you can have hard feelings, but you can't go around screaming and yelling at people. You know, you can have, so I think there is emotional professionalism. But I think for some reason, especially as people make their way up the ranks, they think that expressing any kind of emotion is a sign of weakness. Even that word vulnerability, we talk, you know, it's such a common word now being talked about in the business world that you have to be vulnerable. To this day, it makes some people feel very uncomfortable. I don't want to be vulnerable. Well, all vulnerability means is saying things like, I don't know, or I need help, or I'm overwhelmed, or can you help me do this because I don't know how to do this, or I've been promoted to a position where maybe I need more training. And the reason we're afraid of saying that is for fear that it makes us look weak, which will then damage our careers. The reality is the total opposite. By saying I don't know means someone can help us. But instead we choose to lie, hide, and fake very often, which eventually gets revealed. Enough stress piled on that lying, hiding, and faking collapses either professionally or personally. We either feel the stress or the projects that we're working on start to go haywire. And very often when we get to those points, everybody knows anyway. The amazing thing that I've learned is when you say, can somebody help me? We're surrounded by people who would love to help us. They just didn't think we needed it because we acted as if we didn't. So I think a large part of it is quite frankly fear. Fear that if I express these things, that people will think I'm not qualified for my job, where the opposite is true. And remember, when you are in a position of leadership, you don't actually have to be better at doing the job that the people you lead. You have to be responsible for taking care of them to make sure they're good at their job. But for some reason, we think that I have to be better than you at your own job because I'm the leader. Completely false. I just have to make sure that you're equipped, you have the tools, the training, and the psychological safety to be the best you can be, even if it's better than me. I think some people turn off the humanity.
Yeah. So a little message from Simon Sinek. I enjoy a lot of the work that he shares and engages in. And it just kind of reminds us, how do we need to show up on the job and how are we taking care of those around us, right? Are we fully equipped? And when you're vulnerable as a leader, it lets the rest of the team say, oh, okay, she doesn't know. And that's okay, right? I also read here recently that asking for help is a sign of service. Asking others for support helps other people get into the program with you, the organization with you, and walk alongside you. So how are we looking and showing up in that collaborative way to say, I don't know that. I know someone on our team is a content expert. Let me turn to them. And that's certainly in my shop. While I am in construction, I do not build the homes. I leave that to the experts, right? I'm here to raise funds, manage, set a mission and vision, work alongside the board, make sure that there's outreach. I'm in the community. But when it comes to the nitty gritty of building the homes, I'm going to let you speak to Lori, my program coordinator, my program director, because that's her expertise. And I'm proud to have a team of experts that move the work forward. So just thinking about how you show up in leadership, both formally and informally. Again, just another opportunity to be reflective. You might consider asking yourself these questions, and then you'll get some of these slides to be able to share on your teams. You might do a quick little audit. Ask the teams or organizations placed in the spaces that you're in the following questions. If you make a mistake on this team, will it be held against you? Or do you believe it'll be held against you? Are the members of this team able to bring up problems and tough issues? Do people on this team sometimes reject others for being different? Is it safe to take a risk on this team? Is it difficult to ask other members of this team for help? Would anyone on this team deliberately act in a way that undermines effort, right? Because there are folks that have malice intent in a workspace. Oftentimes folks are just acting out of not knowing or not understanding, or maybe just not emotionally professional. Some folks on the team that want to poke holes in the boat. It's important to address that too, right? So just asking some of these questions when you reflect in the spaces that you work, how do you respond to this? And again, you can deploy this activity in your groups, your organizations, and be prepared for the feedback. Don't deploy this activity if you don't want the feedback, right? And oftentimes we'll do a mini survey, we'll get the data back, and we know the data, we don't do anything with it, right? Don't ask people for their feedback if you're not willing to implement the change, or at least explain to folks, we will get there in the changes that you all are sharing with us. We do value your feedback. Some things we can do things about immediately. Some stuff we just can't change because of this, that, or the other. So if you don't want the feedback, don't ask, right? Don't put yourself in the position, because I believe once you're aware of something, you are accountable for what you've learned. So take that into consideration. Creating a space of psychological safety, some things for you to consider if you're doing assessments. Maybe you're the manager and or you're in HR and you create those assessments, or maybe you can make the suggestion to your leadership. 360 assessments create opportunities for feedback from varying reporting lines, right? So just thinking about your end of year or whenever you're doing one-on-ones, can you talk to other people across the organization that you might be working with? You can maybe do a mini 360 assessment for yourself. Who are some folks that you interface with, be it your clients, your customers, partner family, your director? Maybe you interface with another director on another line. Maybe you work with a partner community organization. Get the feedback. How are you showing up? How are your employees showing up in other spaces, other organizations? So 360 feedback is helpful. Consistent engagement questions to engage your team. Asking those deeper level questions before you just hop into the work. That might look like, what's one thing I can do better to support you this week? How does your workload feel right now? Where can I help? What projects have you enjoyed the most over the past, whatever, right? Maybe over the past week, over the past few months, or I noticed that you really thrive in this space. Is this something more you want to get into? So how are you engaging and getting to know your team members and seeing how you can truly support them? I also like to say, if you don't have capacity to help, don't ask to support someone, right? If you come to me and say, how can I help you? And then I give you a task and you're like, oh, I'm floating, right? Take care of yourself too. And then before you reach out to help others, make sure that you're able to be consistent with that. And then selective vulnerability. Engage in trust building, but be mindful of oversharing and trust destroying habits. You have to be very careful of turning someone's story into gossip in the office or in the organization. Someone may have interfaced with you and really shared some personal things, and you're supposed to be their lockbox. It shouldn't leave your lips. Now, we do need to understand, though, the difference between someone says, I'm going to hurt myself. Those are things we need to report, right? You need to go to HR. You need to follow up with someone, and especially if you're not a trained professional, right? Telling folks to go and get that additional support, doing welfare checks are important. And we can put ourselves in a space of ending up being someone's psychologist or therapist. If you are not a trained psychologist or therapist and you're concerned about someone, you need to immediately take those things to HR, especially in this day and age. Some of our organizations have employee assistance programs like EAP, where you get so many free sessions. Some organizations have mental health professionals on staff, or you're partnered with social work organizations or organizations that really uplift that. Don't be afraid to engage someone. It's better to turn something in if you're concerned than being surprised that you no longer have that team member on your team. So taking those things very seriously are important. And there may be trainings in your area for trauma-informed care, suicide prevention on the job. We have a number of things in Wichita that's really leaning towards, if you believe someone has suicidality or thinking about hurting themselves, what you should do as a team member. These trainings are important to your organization so you are prepared. You may be working with families and such already, but also remember, mental health is something that affects everyone. You can't age out of it, price out of it, race, ethnicity out of it. We all can be affected by mental health changes. And then again, just kind of moving forward and creating a space for psychological safety. Share information about your personal work style and preferences. Encourage teammates to do the same. Be available and approachable to teammates, making time for those ad hoc one-on-one conversations. Feedback sessions, career coaching is helpful. Clearly communicate the purposes of meetings. There's nothing I hate more than someone saying, oh, I need to meet with you at 5 o'clock today, but they don't tell me what it is. I don't know what you want to meet with. So just be upfront on, hey, I would like to meet about this, right? And especially if there's a power dynamic as a supervisor, manager, or maybe the organizational leader, if you just pop a meeting on someone's calendar and they already have anxiety, that person is thinking about all day. Why do they want to meet with me? Am I in trouble? What did I do? Right? So clearly just list, hey, one-on-one with you today, just checking up, nothing urgent, right? Communication on the front end is helpful. Expressing gratitude goes a long way for your teams. Engaging them, thanking them. There is love languages for work style. So, they have the love languages quiz and book for those in relationships, but they also have a love language for those that work with one another. So you might consider that in your organization. Um, and then solicit input, opinions, and feedback from your teammates. Also helps to build bases of psychological safety. Not allowing interruptions to happen, people taking people's ideas, being aware of body language, making sure that we are really listening and leaning in. Oftentimes, if you're like me, I have my phone in my hand 24/7. I have to remind myself, I'm engaged in the conversation. Let me give you my attention. I've asked you to lunch. Let me sit with you and talk with you and give you eye contact, right? I don't know how many of you all have kiddos, or maybe everyone's on the couch and everyone's on their phone. What does quality time look like right now? Put the screen down and engage in interpersonal dialogue. We have to do that at work too, right? Because sometimes we're so tied in and keyed in, we're typing and someone's standing in front of our desk trying to have a conversation with us, but we're still sending that email. How are we building those connected relationships? And then, like I always like to share, cultural humility, a lifelong commitment to learning and critical self-reflection, institutional accountability, and mutual respect and partnership within your organization, your employees, the people that you serve, and your mission, vision, and values. We won't do this last group as a small group discussion, but just something for you to consider in a more reflective way. What can you do to generate greater psychological safety in your organization? What approaches should you prioritize if this is something you want to usher in, or what if you want to strengthen something that's already in place? Do you need to just kind of go back and evaluate what you all are doing to create a more robust plan? What is one commitment you'll make in the next month towards enhancing psychological safety and emotional intelligence for yourself and your organization? And who's going to help you stay accountable, right? A goal with just yourself, you're able to flake on you. Tell folks what your goals are. Who are your accountability partners, so that you can tell them, come back to me in 2 months and see if I did the thing I told you I was going to do. Because then someone knows that you said you were supposed to do it. So then someone can say, oh, you didn't do it. So how are you prioritizing things, right? So who are you sharing your goals with? Take some time to consider those things. And there's no shortage of books. Primal Leadership, Emotional Intelligence 2.0, Becoming a Resonant Leader. There are a number of books for your consideration, certainly more than these. And then just some sources for today, so I'm not making up stuff in our workshop and time together. So I want to thank you all and turn it back over to the Best Art family so they can share any parting words. I will be here if there's any questions.
Darrell, you're muted.
Thank you, because I'm just talking and y'all didn't hear a word I said. Danielle, thank you so much. It was really a learning experience today. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm going to share my screen with you all briefly. Okay. Right. All right. So again, next week's workshop will be social identities. We will be meeting same time, same place on Wednesday, October 11th. If you have not already signed in, you can scan the QR code. Again, Stephanie has placed the sign-in link in the chat box. We will see you all next week. Thank you for joining us, and have a wonderful day and a great weekend. If you have any questions for Danielle, feel free to stay behind, ask questions, or just raise your hand or put something in the chat. She'll make sure to get to you. All right, everyone, have a great day. Bye now.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye,
Have a
Thank
great
you,
day.
everybody. Have a
Bye.
nice rest of the weekend, the week.
You as well. You as well.
Thank you.
Yes, it was great information. Thank you, Jacqueline.
Oh, Adriana, oh, you're still here. Okay. I was like, wait, did she leave?
No, I'm still here.
So I send the reminders out a week. So you'll get one today, a
Okay,
day, and an hour before.
got
So
it. Okay.
yeah. So
To the one that I sent you, right? To the new
yes,
email? Okay.
yes. I'll be
Awesome.
sending those out.
All right. Thank you so much.
No problem. Have a good one.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, I gotta hop off. Thank
All
you.
right,
Bye,
Danielle. Have
Danielle.
a
Thank
great
you
day.
so
Have a
much.
good
I
weekend.
guess.
Welcome.
Bye,
Bye.
guys.
Bye, everyone.